All right, family. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone is doing well. I want to give everyone a chance to come in on the different platforms that we're on. Really excited about this conversation. Dr. Bantu will be joining us in just a few minutes. So I want to give everyone an opportunity. Do me a favor and just tag some people. If you can do that, that would be great. If you could, like, share, subscribe, tag some people in the comments. Be sure to share this. It's going to be a great discussion I have with Dr. Bantu as we talk about Christianity in Africa prior to colonization. So it's going to be a real good discussion. He is getting to a place so he can log on, so he'll be on in a few moments. But I hope everyone is doing well. I look for some of you guys in the comments. But yeah, help us get this out here. This can be a very important discussion. One of the reasons that led me to want to dive into this particular topic is just several discussions that I have had with people, either on one end who pretty much discount northern African Christianity from Africans, and so that they'll discount in terms of how they're presented in iconography and on pictures. And then also some would even say, well, northern African Christianity doesn't count because they're not Bantu speaking. And so they will say, well, show me Christianity in Africa in the western part of the continent of Africa. And so it's going to be a great discussion with Dr. Bantu. So again, he's running a little behind, but he's going to get on, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So again, just like, share, subscribe. So you can subscribe, and so while we'll go through this, some of these parameters, follow us on YouTube if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe to the Urban Perspective on YouTube. Greatly appreciate that. We can get the subs up there, and I can keep providing content just from people who have a wealth of knowledge on just various topics. So again, really excited about that. But yeah, let me know. I'll look for some of you guys in the comments. Let me know you're on. And like I said, tag some of your friends, whether we're on Facebook and YouTube right now. And a couple of people were asking about this just being recorded or whatever. Yeah, this stream will be saved. So for people that may want to catch it later or go back, because once we get Dr. Bantu on, trust me, you're going to want to take copious notes. You want to take copious notes once we get him on. So while we're doing that, I'll let you know about a couple of my books. My first book, Renewal, Grace and Redemption, and the Story of Ruth. That's available. And then obviously we'll talk today about my second release, which is The Whitewashing of Christianity, A Hidden Past, A Hurtful Present, and A Hopeful Future. One of the things I'm doing now too, I want to let you guys know about, is if people are interested in signed copies of this, signed copies of either of these books, go to my website, jeromegayjr.com. We're actually ready for that now. Several people were asking about that, and so really excited about that opportunity. Let's look here in the comments and see who's here. What's going on? Wavy P. Newton, I see you. Jonathan Gans out of Texas. And of course, my man, the BK apologist, Alfredo Valentin. What's up, bro? I probably won't see you out of next week. I'm actually still off social media, but I'm doing this because Dr. Bantu and I already had this schedule. I know this is on social, but I'm not like looking at Instagram and all that right now. So Todd, Gilbert Todd, what's up, man? Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Looking forward to being back next week at home at Vision. So yeah, Michelle, I guess you didn't came back from your hiatus. So welcome back. Welcome back to the social media world. Really appreciate this sister. Listen, she's an apologetics, biblical, exegetical beast. Really love her contribution to the kingdom. And then her and Shani and a host of others, but primarily those two young ladies really helped me with getting my book out, The Whitewashing Christianity, which now some of you are asking is now available on Kindle now. So you got the Kindle version that you can get. Again, the Kindle version of my book, The Whitewashing of Christianity, which again is available now. You can see that's available now if you are interested on wherever books are sold. So waiting for Dr. Bantu, y'all. But listen, just hang tight with me. Hang tight. This is going to be a great discussion with him. Really good discussion with him. And Stephen, I see you. I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate you enjoying the teaching. I'm a servant. That's it. Just a servant of Yeshua, and I want to give him glory and honor with the gifts that he's placed in me for his own glory. And so I want to give him back what's his. Who else is here? Who else here? Who else is in the comments? Penny Matthew, I think I missed you. Grace and peace to you as well. To everyone in the comments, man. Stephen T. Nichols. Yeah. I'm sorry, I already did that one. So yeah, he said, yeah, I appreciate that, brother. Appreciate those comments. So hopefully we get him on soon, man. I just got off with him, and so he was trying to get into a good spot. So he had some issues with his rental car and all of that, man. Of course, something happened the day of, right? My sister Michelle showing love about the whitewashing Christianity. Again, y'all, help me, help get this out, help get this out. We're answering questions. What I wanted to do with this book is I wanted to answer the question as to why, or how did Christianity get whitewashed, and why do we not recognize the historical roots of it? How did we get there? How do we get to this point of associating Christianity with one particular racial group, primarily white people, and how we know it's a global faith of all people, but not everyone knows that. Many people are rejecting it as a result of those issues. And so that's one of the things I wanted to tackle in the book. And so the response has been amazing. It's only been out a little over a month, and going on two, but the response has been great. So keep tagging people, keep tagging friends and family. Also, obviously, people who don't believe, who don't agree with us theologically, or even in some cases, even though this really shouldn't be negotiable, but even historically, I think it's going to be good as Dr. Bantu helps us kind of think through African Christianity. While we're waiting for him as well, I want to let you guys know something I'll be a part of. But my sister Lisa Fields has Reclaiming Christianity in Washington, D.C., September 3rd and 4th. And so just make sure it's called Courageous Conversations. The theme is Reclaiming Christianity. That's going to be a great conference. So register for that. You got a couple options, the in-person or virtually. So go to that website. I'll put it up here again, courageousconvos.org. That's going to be real good. Courageousconvos.org. So yeah, excited about that. JP Davis, what's up? Appreciate you being on. Appreciate you guys being on. Again, if you have not subscribed, do me a favor, subscribe to the Urban Perspective, the YouTube channel. Really excited for some, as I'm getting back in the swing of things. I've been on sabbatical. Next week, I'm getting back in the swing of things. And so excited to continue to provide some new content, and more content for you guys to tackle some of these topics. Marcus Felton, I appreciate these comments as well. Appreciate that. Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate that. Appreciate the love you guys are showing. Appreciate the love you guys are showing. So let me check, guys, see what's going on with Dr. Bantu. Y'all hang tight. I literally just got a hold of him before we started this, and he was trying to get to a spot, said he'd be on rather quickly. So let me just check in on that. So prayerfully, we get to keep everything. We get to keep everything on this convo. But yeah, so I'll share this too. So I've been, while I've been on break in terms of off of social, I still have been like listening to tons of discussions from people who don't believe. And I just think it's important that we listen. We also read from people that we may disagree with, because this is one of the ways that we can grow. And so a couple of arguments, some of these I hadn't heard so passionately, and that was that there were no, and this argument was just crazy. But the brother said, man, there were no deities in Africa, no deity. So he's rejecting the monotheism belief in one God, and the polytheism belief in many gods of Africa. So he said there was no deities, it was all principles. So they just anthropomorphize principles and precepts. And so that's one of the things we'll kind of broach this afternoon as well, is I want Dr. Bantu to begin to help us think through, what was spirituality like in Africa. And if you haven't gotten his book, Gospel Haymanot, he addresses that, some of the language barriers, because African Christianity was by many scholars, I'm putting that in quotes, was demonized simply because they didn't understand their language and customs. And they actually helped us really get orthodoxy and orthopraxy. They didn't separate the two. Right belief and right practice, those things went hand in hand, as it does in scripture, right? Otherwise, you're functionally antinomian if there's no moral compass that is governed by the scriptures. And so we get this from African Christians. And so I want Dr. Bantu to dive into that for us. And um, so I'm excited about that. So let me text him right quick, y'all. Again, sorry that we are starting much later than anticipated. Let me see. Now see if he can use his phone to log on. Yeah, so that discussion where the brother was just dismissing, he wasn't dismissing spirituality, but to say that there were no deities at all in Africa was just crazy. It was just crazy. And what I find is a lot of times, not only is it primarily Google scholarship, they rarely provide references for the things that they're saying. So they're, even though they oppose faith, they're essentially telling those of us who listen to them to just take my word for it. That's something that you kind of put in your arsenal if you're engaging people who say, "Hey, man, I don't have belief." And it's just I've been hearing a lot of conversations as it relates to just Africa, and there's so many misconceptions and so much just bad info out there, y'all. And so again, that's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to dive into today. So I'm gonna give them a few more minutes, y'all. Thank y'all for hanging tight with me. Um, is there any? I'll let y'all just throw some questions now. We're gonna do that for the end, but since we're waiting for him to hop on, you put some questions in the comments. What are some things that maybe we may have if we have some extra time? Assuming he hops on, which I'm hoping that should be soon, that you would like addressed by Dr. Band too. So let me see what you got. Go ahead and put some questions in the comments, and I may, if I have time. I already have some set ones, obviously, but yeah, if there's some, we'll be able to broach your questions with Dr. Band too. Jonathan Gann said prayers up for Mr. Bantu and his family. Appreciate that. I'm sure he'll appreciate that as well. I'll let him know. I need y'all praying for technology right now. All right, so pray pray for his technology, that everything of his technology is working, because it's messing up right now, and so we can get him on. But y'all have any questions? Y'all put some questions in the comments, and I'll try to. If we can get them on, I'll wait a couple more minutes, y'all. If not, we'll come at it again. We'll come at it again. But yeah, he had some issues literally right as we were getting on the live. So, but I trust God's providence. So if we have to do it later, then we'll just do that. But he just texted me back, and so he's going to try to use his phone. So hopefully, StreamYard will work that way for him. Be any questions y'all would want me to ask him as you think about Christianity in Africa prior to colonization? Prior to colonization. All right. So I got okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Are you sideways, Doc? Can you turn your phone? There we go. Yeah, yeah. Because you were side. Nah, you right there. Now you're right there. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
hey, my brother.
Hey man. Hey man, you're the man of the hour right now, man. Can you hear me, man?
Oh, I hear you, brother. Am I coming through?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh,
I don't
cool,
know if you want
cool.
to bring your phone. It's a whole bunch of headspace. I don't know if you could. Yeah, but if not, I mean, it's cool. We'll roll with it. We will roll with it.
Yeah.
But listen, y'all. Well, I'm glad he's on. The people were praying. We were praying for your technology, man. We was like, Doc, we we gonna come together and pray so we can get it in. But y'all, this man needs no introduction. He's been a frequent guest on the Urban Perspective. I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Vince Bantu. Brother got more degrees than a thermometer. Got a BA from Wheaton, a MDiv from Gordon Conwell, a THM from Princeton Theological Seminary, a MA from the Catholic University of America, as well as a PhD from the Catholic University of America. And he's also the author of two books, A Multitude of All Peoples, and then one we'll discuss today, Gospel Haymanot. And so, Dr. Bantu, welcome to the Urban Perspective. What's up, man?
Hey, Pastor Gabe, man, it's good to be here, man. I'm sorry I'm running late, man. Had a crazy flight delay,
No, I
but man,
understand.
I'm glad to be here though.
No problem, man. Thank you so much for being here. Glad you're here. Really excited to just talk about some of these things. I was telling the people as well that you're going to be a part of the Courageous Conversations conference next month. So I'm going to see you there in DC by our sister, visionary leader, apologist, Lisa Fields. So really excited about that. But man, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to dive right in. I want to dive right in. And so, we both have written books, and my latest book was called The Whitewashing of Christianity. And so I wanted to define whitewashing because that's going to help us segue into our conversation. And I said this, I said, whitewash Christianity refers to the affinity of white Christian scholars to dominate the Bible, Christian art, literature, and history with all people at the expense of authentic ethnicity and true scholarship in order to resonate most deeply with white audiences, primarily based on their experiences, presuppositions, and world views. And one of the reasons I put that in there, man, is because this not only changes the way we view Christianity, but it also changes the way we view history and how we view entire continents and people. In particular, we're going to focus and zoom in on Africa. And so as we think about that, as we think about whitewashing and colonization and how we begin to look at history through one lens, typically a Eurocentric lens, you address this in your book, Gospel Haymanot. You said over a century um, before the reforms of Martin Luther in Europe, an Ethiopian monastic figure named Estefanos started a movement that challenged the dominant Ethiopian church. And so there's a reason we're not aware of these things. So just for those that may not be aware, first question is this as we dive in. The first question is, I'm sorry, that's not the one I want to ask, is what is colonization? What is colonization? Because that contributes to the lack of knowledge we have about Christianity in Africa is because people kind of took over and in doing so erased culture and history. So explain that to us.
Yeah, that's a great question, Pastor Gabe. I would probably answer that question in the famous evil words of Richard Henry Pratt, who, under the
Mm,
authority of the United States government and with support of dominant culture churches in the United States, was the leader of one of the most famous Indian boarding schools. And these were things that happened all over the United States, where these were so-called missionaries that would literally
mm,
kidnap Native American children and bring them into these schools to evangelize them and to turn them into Christians, and which for them meant the same thing as turning them into white people. And Richard Henry Pratt at the Carlisle Indian boarding school, he had a famous phrase where he said, "We need to kill the Indian and save the man." And so the
mm.
idea in that was somewhere under the what they perceived as a savage, broken or fallen red skin and an indigenous way of being, underneath that is a real human being, and we just have to bring him out of there. We have to bring that real human out by making them white.
Wow.
And so it goes down to language, trying to go into Africa indigenous Americas, Aboriginal Australians in Asia and all other kind of places, and saying that they don't need to speak that language. You need to speak a European language. You don't need to dress the way you dress. You need to dress the way Europeans do. You don't need to have your form of government. You need to have our form of government. And you don't need to practice your particular religion. You need to practice our religion exactly the way we practice it, and economically, religiously, socially, in all forms, trying to come in and militarily dominate a place, but then try to recreate that people in another people group's image.
Wow, wow. Well, no, thank you for breaking that down, because we hear that term thrown around a lot. That we need to decolonize our faith or decolonize our minds. And in my book, addressing whitewashing, it's the same thing. Is we got to have a decolonized view so that we can see the authentic gospel that embraces all people, which is what you address in that first book, a multitude of all peoples. And so now that you've kind of explained to us some of the things that was as it relates to colonization, I want to move on, to explain some of the mechanics of African spirituality, because you mentioned this in your book, Gospel Haymanot, is that and we'll talk about language in a second, but some of those language barriers caused them to view Africans as heretics when they were actually quite orthodox, quite faithful to the text, more so than the counterparts that criticized them. And so even beyond just Christianity, but because some people are of the mindset, I was telling the viewers earlier that I was listening to a conversation of people who don't believe. And they were saying that their contention was that there was no deity in Africa, that they were all anthropomorphized principles. So can you explain, I know it's a big question, but just explain some of the mechanics of African spirituality, and then please connect that to African Christianity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I caught the question, Pastor Gabe, but I just want to make sure, am I coming in okay? Because I think my signal might not be great. But are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. The video is a little choppy, but I hear you fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me I wonder if it'd be better if I move somewhere. But yeah, you know, because I think it's frozen on my end. Are you hearing me okay, Pastor Gay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it just cleared up on my end too. But yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you for that question. I guess I would just say two things. Is that number one, I think it's very it's a very false claim to say that Africans did not have a concept of a supreme deity. That is exactly contrary to African spirit. African people of various cultures, whether it's like antiquity or modern era, like ancient Egypt, ancient Nubia, ancient Ethiopia, Carthage, or more like kind of other cultures as well, like Akan or Yoruba or Zulu or Congo. And people can actually read Jacob Olupona's book African Religions, and it actually does a good job of describing how despite the fact that there's a wide amount of variety and diversity, of course, in African spirituality or African spiritualities and religions, that there are some things that you can point to that are commonalities, like ancestor worship, and pouring of libations and different kinds of things, the role of drumming. And one of the very first thing that Olupona points out in his book on surveying African religions, that the commonalities is the belief in a supreme deity. And so African religions across the board believe in the supreme deity. The Khan people call the supreme deity Ji Nyame. And Ji Nyame actually means only God. That's literally what it means, that only God, and it has a variety of meanings, but it means only God is the highest of all highs. And there's Oludumare, who is the supreme deity in Yoruba religion. So there's definitely a belief in a supreme deity, and of course deities in African spiritualities, right? But then we get into the other point you brought up about even African Christianity, and how even various kind of ways that African Christianity was growing as well was not being embraced or was being ostracized by the kind of the dominant Christian tradition in the Roman Empire. And a lot of that also had to do with language, because I would say another thing about African spirituality that I would say African Christians embrace was a holistic view of the world, and understanding that the physical world and the spiritual world is all connected. And European culture, Western culture, it actually tends to want to kind of divide things or draw very sharp distinctions between things, which isn't always a bad thing, because sometimes it can help you appreciate the nuance in something, but sometimes it can actually go to a place where you see things as wholly disconnected. And I would say that this came to a head in a major way during the Christological controversies and conversations in the church, and that was really the main kind of breaking point between the Christian churches of Africa and those that were in the European continent, what would later be known as Europe. And the main issue was how to describe the humanity and the divinity of Jesus Christ. And the Roman, or the later European perspective, was one of kind of drawing sharp distinctions. And from an African linguistic mindset, to say that, for example, Jesus has a humanity and a divinity that are distinct from one another, that violated a very African concept of things being holistic. In fact, the Ethiopian church, its name actually comes from the belief that Jesus is one, and that his humanity and his divinity are one, united together. And so that was something that was one of the main kind of breaking points as far as how Christianity in Africa in particular was very rooted in African culture, but was really dismissed. And that's part of the reason, as you brought up, we don't know about people like Estefanos and Walata Petros and Shenouda and all of these other heroes of the faith from the African continent, because their particular brand of Christianity that was steeped in African culture was rejected as heretical, when in fact it's not. It's just an African expression of the gospel that was unique to that context.
Wow, awesome, man. Now that's so profound, because again, if we're just quick to throw people in the heretic box and to dismiss them, to dismiss aspects of their culture, when they were indeed worshiping Yahweh, who we were, Yahweh in terms of Hebrew dialect, then we not only um, mischaracterize that entire people group, but then they try to justify dismissing their contributions. And so that contributes to why there is such a lack of knowledge, again, about African Christianity. And so that brings us to that next question, which you somewhat answered, but I want you to give us some examples. So the question is, was there Christianity in Africa before colonization? And so I'm looking at, so the Arab invasion of primarily northern was around the 6th century, and then we had the European conquest. But what was, and I know we can't exhaust them, but just talk to the people, because I think it's so important for you guys, and I want you to go back and listen to this, because you need this in your arsenal. We need to be able to refute the claim that our ancestors, in particular African ancestors, did not worship Christ until 1619 in the transatlantic slave trade. Nothing could literally be further from the truth. So can you just answer that and give us some examples of Christianity in Africa before colonization?
Yeah. I would say maybe I'll just give a brief overview, and then we'll have more time for getting into the weeds of it. But I would just say, as a brief overview, and get into this wonderfully in Whitewashing of Christianity in the book. But basically, as you already know, and as many people may know, that Christianity included Africans from the very beginning. I mean, of course, in the Bible, right? That we have, even in the Old Testament, we have Africans such as Moses' wife and Ebed Melech in the book of Jeremiah. And then also going into the New Testament, you have Simon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus carry the cross. And then you have the eunuch, who was from Nubia. I mean, he's called an Ethiopian, which is just a Greek word for black. But he was a eunuch of Kandake, which means he was from Nubia. So you have already one of the first sub-Saharan African Christians mentioned in the Bible was this eunuch who was in charge of the whole treasury of Nubia, which was one of the most powerful nations in the ancient world. And you had basically the second most powerful individual in one of the most powerful nations in the ancient world become a Christian, become baptized, and heard the gospel from the Apostle Philip. And so we have Africans all in at Pentecost. It says Egyptians and Libyans were present at Pentecost. So Africa was a part of the diverse, multicultural body of Christ from the get-go, and from the very beginning. But as is pointed out in the book Whitewashing of Christianity, it didn't stop there, but the church continued to grow in Africa. And you had church fathers and church mothers in Egypt and in Carthage, like Tertullian, Origen, Athanasius, Perpetua, Felicity, Amos Eclectica, Athanasius. The list goes on and on. But the thing is not only did Christianity grow in North Africa along kind of the areas of North Africa that had become colonized by the Roman Empire, talking about colonization, but also the gospel went into sub-Saharan Africa outside of the Roman Empire. And Nubia and Ethiopia became Christian nations freely in the 4th and then in the 5th centuries. And so basically by the 5th century, all, not just some, but all of the major African kingdoms and civilizations were predominantly Christian. Christianity was the dominant
Wow.
religion in North Africa, in Egypt, in Nubia, and in Ethiopia, which basically all of those are the primary civilizations of Africa in the 5th century, in the first 5 centuries of the Common Era. So Christianity is all over Africa, and it came in freely, and it came in with no colonization. In fact, at the time of the first few centuries, when it was in Egypt and North Africa and all that, the Roman Empire was actually against Christianity. They were persecuting Christians.
Yeah.
They were martyring
Yes.
Christians. And the Roman Empire, talking about like Greece, Italy, Spain, that was a dangerous place to be a Christian back then. In fact, it was safer to be a Christian in Afghanistan and in Iran and in Iraq, because over there in the Persian Empire, Christians were not being persecuted. They were over there too. We could have another episode about Asian Christianity. There's a rich history there too. But in Africa,
Come on, Doc.
Christians were actually in Nubia and Ethiopia, in the free parts of Africa, they were exercising freedom in Christ freely. But in the Roman parts of Africa, Egypt and Roman North Africa, what we now call Tunisia, Algeria, that's where you had some of the most examples of Christians being martyred for the faith. Again, Perpetua and Felicity, and so many North African and Egyptian martyrs that died for the faith. And who was killing them? It was Romans. It was Roman soldiers. So how are we going to say that Christianity is a white man's religion when, in fact, it was actually the prototype of the Western white world, the Roman Empire, that was trying to stop Christianity and persecuting it. And it was many times, it was Africans. It was Europeans too and Asians, but it was oftentimes Africans who were some of the most famous martyrs who died for the faith under people like Diocletian. And so not only, the last thing I'll say about it, but not only that, not only did Christianity grow in North and in East Africa, but long before colonization, long before the 16th century, Christianity also began to spread into Central and to West Africa, also freely, also without colonization. And it was from one African to another, spreading east and spreading south across the continent. Even long before the Portuguese and Belgian slave ships showed up on the Gold Coast, Christianity was already in the Gold Coast long before that ever happened. So it was all over Africa.
Woo. Hey, family, just put a mic drop. Put mics in the comments. I need y'all to just put mics in the comments right now, because you just dropped that. And that's, again, this and one of the things I wanted to address in my book, family. I want to address my book, and you can get it in every single form. You get hardcover, paperback, Kindle, or Audible if you want to listen. Is I address why do we associate Christianity with one race? Why do we need to answer this question about it being a white man's religion? And so now Dr. Bantu just gave you a rich history, and there's a chapter in my book called Hidden Heroes, and I go over 11 African Christians thousands of years before colonization, so that we can know about this. We need to know this rich history. I need y'all to put those mics in the comments. I just want you to see some of this love. I just want you to see some of this love, Dr. Bantu. I just want you to see the love from the people. But it's so important. And family, remember, the reason we do this is because we want to be equipped to go after people who do not share our faith, because they are making an eternal decision to reject Yeshua based on historical misinformation that has been presented as fact. That's why I started off defining whitewashing. That's why I wrote my book. That's why you need to get this book, but also you need to get Dr. Bantu's book, his book, Gospel Haymanot. You need to get that as well. That's an excellent resource. And family, he goes over a lot of this just in his introduction. And then there are several other scholars that contribute to that book. Now, just as a follow-up on this one, Dr. Bantu, is one of the arguments that I've heard And I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but one of the reasons, they essentially try to paint Northern Africa white. And so they'll say, well, they weren't Bantu speaking, and so as if only the Black Africans were in West Africa. This is an argument from people with PhDs who are trying to, again, justify whitewashing Christianity. Can you explain why is that? And if there, can you give us some examples of Western Christianity in Western Africa, just as a follow-up?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because you're right, Pastor. That's what comes up a lot of the times. Now, I want to speak to it from, it's a complex question, so I want to give it a complex answer, but hopefully not too complex. In that, I would say I'll start off with saying that there is a reason why, there is a valid reason why some people tend.
Hold on, we lost your audio. No, we can't hear you.
Just Europe as well.
Okay, we got you.
And the reason for that is because, as we already talked about, Egypt, by the time Christianity came on the scene, and by the time these nations, Christianity started to spread in North Africa, Egypt and North Africa were part of the Roman Empire. They were colonized. Now, they had been colonized just right before Christianity, actually. Alexander the Great, and then later when the Romans took over the Greek Empire, they took Egypt. Then also the area known as Carthage was conquered by the Romans after the Punic Wars. And then also Mauritania, the kingdom of Mauritania, was conquered by the Romans as well. So just before Christianity came on the scene, basically all of the North African coast had become colonized by the Roman Empire. But these were ancient civilizations that had been around longer than the Roman Empire were. They had their own languages, Egyptian, Punic, and what archaeologists call Libyco-Punic, or what the indigenous people today call Amazigh, or the Imaziran. And so these already had cultures and languages that then later became colonized and brought into the Roman Empire. But as part of being colonized by the Roman Empire, just like modern Western nations today, believed that their culture was superior and wanted to import their culture into these African nations that had already been there. And so then you had a mixture of cultures where you had Egyptian and Greek, or you had Punic and Latin, and you had all these you had the indigenous North African cultures, but then you also had kind of Roman culture, and there was a strong sense in which Roman culture was better. And so this is where I have to give a little bit of pushback and on a lot of our North African church fathers and mothers, is that many of them, even themselves, embrace that idea that Roman culture was superior to even African cultures. And so that's why they wrote in Greek, they wrote in Latin, and they thought in a very kind of Roman kind of way. Even Augustine, right? He's probably the most famous North African theologian, but he was trained in Italy by Ambrose, and he read Cicero. So his thinking was very Romanized in terms of his culture. Now, having said that, though, Augustine and Tertullian and Athanasius and all these people, they're still African. And they're still North Africans. And let me say something very clear. They were not white. They were absolutely not European people. Now, see, the thing is that they actually framed a lot of Western thought that came after them. So these medieval, Renaissance thinkers, they're looking back and realizing that they're being influenced by Augustine. And so they feel the need to make him white. Just like archaeologists in the modern world, they want to make Egypt white because they think, well, how could such an advanced civilization be people of color? And so they couldn't be. And so that's how the racism and the white supremacy and the whitewashing of Christianity that you already go into in the book plays out. But I think that's part of why of how it's seen that way. So the invalid part of that is the fact that, again, they were not white, they were not European, they were North African. And so they were not, like you said, Bantu, sub-Saharan Africans, but they also were not white or European, but they were North Africans. They were Egyptians and North Africans that operated from, and they had a mixed culture. Even Augustine, to a certain degree, retained some of his North African culture. A lot of people think through his mother, Monica, which is even an Imaziran, or, the inaccurate term is Berber name. And so, there's still some, but then also very Romanized. Now, the last thing I want to say about that, though, is this is exactly why, Pastor Gay, why I feel that it's so important that we understand the history of sub-Saharan African Christianity. And please don't get me wrong, because I think we absolutely have to know and claim the North African church fathers and mothers as well. They're African. They're African people, and they're African theologians. Absolutely. But one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we understand, for example, the history of Nubian Christianity and Ethiopian Christianity and the Christianity that spread from there into West Africa even. The reason we need to understand that is because not only because they are Bantu, sub-Saharan African people of a darker skin, not only that, but also because these were people who were not in the Roman Empire, but they were an independent African nations. And when they did theology in their own languages and according to their own culture and mentalities. They weren't emulating Ambrose or Cicero, but they were actually doing theology according to their own worship style. Ethiopian worship music, the Degwa music by Saint Yared, is an indigenous form of African worship. And so that's just one example. But again, and then also the Dersan of people like Georgius of Sagla and Zaria Cope, these are a style of literature that are unique to the African Ethiopian context. And so again, it's not to say that I'll close what I'm saying with a modern example that, today we have, in our community, there are many people who feel that to be a good Christian, you have to kind of do it the dominant culture way. You have to embrace dominant culture theology, worship. You have to quote those speakers, those pastors, and that if you do things in a uniquely Black way, somehow that's not as theologically robust or profound. A lot of times, even Black people can feel that way, and that's that internalized racism, right? And so I would say that the North African Christians had a little bit of that going on, whereas in sub-Saharan Africa, you get a lot more of a Black and proud kind of vibe. And that's why I think it's so important to know about that. But again, all of these people are Africans. And yes, they were on, like we are today, they were in different places and on a different spectrum of their journey about how to negotiate the colonization that some of them were experiencing. And then also how to reject a whitewashed Christianity that we're still dealing with, as your book addresses, but then also how to really walk and follow Jesus in their own African skin.
Man, hey, more mics, man. I mean, you're giving us so much wisdom. I want to talk about what you talked about. One of the things I do address is I deal with three different responses to whitewashing. So I deal with liberation theology, self-hatred. That's called self-hatred, the making of a coon, and then urban apologetics. And Dr. Macaulay addresses this in Reading While Black in terms of how some people you called it internalized racism. And it says, and he's talking about Black responses, Black and brown responses to racism and colonization. And they're pretty much three. He said, one sought to end racism and form a family rooted in our mutual recognition of the Imago Dei and belief in the Lordship of Christ. Another group accepted the Black plight and tried to make the most of it. That's kind of what you're talking about. Some people internalized it and just went along with it and didn't revolt. Then it said they looked for an eschatological redemption. Then a third saw hope in revolution. And so it's important that we understand this, family. And again, this is all addressed in the book. This is all addressed in my book. And Dr. Bantu writes the afterword for my book. And so here's our last question, man, because you talk about language in your book, Gospel Haymanot. And you said the Ge'ez word Haymanot can mean faith, belief, religion, creed, and is a uniquely African alternative to the dominant Hellenistic term theology. So here's what I want you to do. Explain the language barriers to understanding African Christianity.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if I could maybe just tie it in with just making a brief comment with the quote that you were reading and the kind of the different strands of thought, because I think it all ties together very well, because I would even want to maybe even add maybe a fourth school of thought to those approaches, because sometimes in my classes I'll even talk about how we have colonial theology, but then we often have like post-colonial theology or decolonial theology or anti-colonial theology, and hear me right, because I think all of that is necessary, because the reality is that as African Americans, Native Americans, Latinx, whatever, we have been a colonized people, and so we can't escape the fact that there is anti-colonial and decolonial work that needs to be done. Yes and amen. But I want to add another category to it, which is the acolonial theology. That means like theology that knows no colonization. I'm talking about
Come
Wakanda
on, Doc.
theology, where it's an undominated theology. There's no, and here's why I think this is so important, because we as Black people, we have to know how to articulate what it means to be Black in God's image. What does it mean that God made us Black on purpose? What does that mean in addition to our response to racism and oppression? I got to say it one more time. What does it mean to be Black in God's eyes in addition to our response to oppression? And I say that it's so important that we know how to answer that, because sometimes I think that we might think, even subconsciously, that the totality of the Black experience and Black culture is basically just these various responses to what white people have done first, right? But I think we have to remember that, again, there is anti-colonial and decolonial work that needs to be done, because these things happen. Slavery, Jim Crow, terror, lynching, mass incarceration, these things have happened, and they are happening. So we have to fight back. And exactly right. I agree with you, Pastor Gay, and what Dr. McCauley was saying, that there are these kind of strands of thought. But the other thing I want to draw us to, this is why I study, this leads into your question, this is why I study ancient African languages, because they're colonial. They weren't responding to Western colonialism because they never were colonized in the first place. And so then we are able to go back, we're able to Sankofa and go back and understand who are we as African descended people, other than just a reaction to or a footnote in the history of Western oppression. And so we have to understand what exactly that means. We have to think about people like Phyllis Wheatley, right? Who was a theologian, who was a Christian apologist, but she also drew upon her African ancestry when she talked about the sun veneration, because Africans, going back to ancient Egypt, Nubia, and all the way across West Africa, have worshipped the sun. So even in her poetry, and scholars have noted this, that even in her poetry, she has sun, and I go into this in Gospel Haymanot, she has sun veneration and an emphasis on the sun in her poetry. Now, it's not in a worshipful way, because she understood that there's no Lord but Jesus Christ. But at the same time, as part of her African culture, she still uses the sun. And that actually was something that happened in ancient Ethiopian churches as well, where they still incorporated that. So that's contextualization. And it's no different than European Christians making Christmas trees or making Christmas wreaths or using the name Easter to celebrate the Holy Pascha. They took their culture, their pre-Christian Anglo-Saxon culture, and brought it in. And so in the same way, African, Asian, Native American, all of us have a way of, under the authority of the Word of God and through the guidance of the Holy Spirit and no other spirit, that we also, our ancestry and traditions can also have a place, a redeemed and transformed place in our worship of Jesus Christ. And our ancestors, even here, even in the United States, did that and continue to retain African culture. And so that's why it's so important to go to the languages, as you asked about the language barriers, because that's a big issue. And that's where it can help us to go back and, again, Sankofa and understand how theology was done in an yes, African American, but also in an African context. Because, again, as you mentioned, the word Haymanot in Ge'ez, it's an Ethiopian word, and actually in various Ethiopian Eritrean languages that means faith, but it's a holistic term. As you said, it means faith, actions, deeds. And so it speaks, again, as we said at the beginning, to that holistic idea that spirituality is not divorced from social life or social action. And so, again, that's a whole other issue, right? That plays into modern day issues. But again, the issue, again, that goes to language is that after the Council of Chalcedon in 451, the Ethiopian, Egyptian, Nubian, the majority Christians of Africa, they had a position that was different than the Roman church. And a lot of it had to do with language. They were talking about Jesus's humanity and his divinity. And they had these different words that were really kind of linked to European Greek culture about the difference between person and nature that didn't translate, that didn't really communicate into an African context, where, for example, in certain languages where they don't have that same division of person and nature, but those things go together. And so that's why, that's really two reasons, I think, to sum it up, why it's important to understand and engage in African languages, and understanding how language is a symbol of how people communicate themselves. And there are many other symbols too that we do in the Black church and in Black culture, whether it's music or preaching style or ministry style or all those kind of things. But language as well is one of those symbols that go back to our ancestry that we have to be able to express in our own way. Because even when we look at the gospel writers, Luke wrote more towards the Gentiles, Matthew wrote more towards the Hebrews, and they used different symbols, different ideas, different concepts to communicate the same truth. So it has to be the one truth, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, but it does translate into other languages and embrace other concepts. And so that's where
Uh-oh. I think, oh man. Hold on, guys. Hopefully we think we lost him for a second. Oh, oh man. Oh man. Oh, I think we got him back. Okay, we got you back.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. But yeah,
Not a problem.
yeah.
Yeah, so you were saying the last thing we caught, you again Sankofa, and just for people who don't know, Sankofa means to go back. It's an African term. This concept of going back to retrieve that was lost, or even to learn from things from the past. And so you were talking about just that Sankofa moment that we're in now, as we begin to think through again all of the rich heritage and contribution of Africa and obviously Africans to the Christian faith prior to colonization. So I wasn't sure if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, Dr. Bantu.
Oh yeah. No, that I think that's exactly right. I would say, it's a maybe yeah, I would agree with what you said, Pastor, and I would say it's a two-sided coin of both going back and retrieving that which was
Yeah.
stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And really understanding our answer. I mean, just as an example, not only myself, but my wife and kids and I, we're actually all in the process right now of learning Twi, which is a Ghanaian language, in order to, like, as a way of literally going back and getting something that was literally taken and stolen, which was our
Yeah.
languages from West Africa. But then I think the other side of that coin too, and this is something that I think requires a lot of more conversation with us as a community, is going back and getting that which was stolen, but also reflecting on that which has been preserved. And that is something that I think we need to do in conversation with our African brothers and sisters and our diasporic, Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. Because, Pastor, I know you know too, that it's funny when you go to Africa, or you don't have to go to Africa, when you connect with African people or Black people throughout the diaspora, you start to notice cultural similarities in terms of parenting style, in terms of rhythms, in terms of preaching style. There are some things that even that body memory takes. I'm taking that from, because we've been watching High on the Hog, and I've been enjoying that Netflix show. But that
Yeah.
is just kind of a reminder to me of how there were a lot of things that were just cut off and that were just taken. That to the degree that we're able and called, we need to try to go back and get. But there's also things that have actually been preserved through community and through family that we can continue to also cultivate.
Wow. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Bantu. One thing I do, if you have time, one of our viewers put this up, and I was wondering if you can address this right quick. This will be the last question, because I know we in terms of time, but it says, do Africans see Christianity as a white man's religion, or is that a Western thing?
Oh my goodness. I'll just answer that by sharing two quick stories. Number one, I just was speaking a couple weeks ago with a collective of churches in the greater Johannesburg area that are doing ministry in the townships, which is like the South African way of saying the hood. And they were doing a series similar to your book, Pastor Gay, about, and it was called "Is Christianity White Man's Religion?" And they have people all over their context that are saying exactly that Christianity came into South Africa through the Zulu Wars and Dutch and English colonization,
Wow.
and then apartheid.
Wow.
And that, Christianity was the religion that sponsored apartheid. So, it was, and so they are strongly battling and doing apologetics with this same thought in South Africa. Second story was, I was in Senegal, and I was teaching African Christian history to a bunch of Senegalese pastors. And I was talking about the same thing we were just talking about in this podcast. Christianity was in Ethiopia, Nubia, Egypt, all that. It was like 40 pastors in the class. And Senegal is only like 5% Christian, y'all. So, I mean, like, this was making up a large percentage of the body of Christ. And they were saying, we have never heard this information. We have never heard, we had no idea that Christianity was in Africa on the other side of the continent. And then I was telling them also in Senegal too, it reached there too before colonization. But they were like, we had no idea, because they were saying in Senegal, which is 95% Muslim, the perception is that, see, they got the house of slaves in Senegal. And I went to visit that as well. It's one of those slave castles. And it's one of those places that you have to do holy rage when you go visit, and holy lament. It's one of those places with the door no return, and one of the last places that our ancestors stepped foot on African soil before they were brutally kidnapped and raped and herded even worse than cattle and shipped over in ships over to America. So there's a church right next to the house of slaves, where the Portuguese and later the Dutch and these other people were claiming or saying that they were worshiping Jesus while they were shipping African flesh over to the Americas. They were telling me, the pastor was telling me, when people think of Christianity, that's what they think of. And so that's why their context is a 95% Muslim context. Now, I was telling them, like, actually, Islam came into Senegal in the 11th century by the sword with the Almoravid dynasty that came in from Morocco, but that's another story. But on the flip side, so actually, even in Senegal, Islam came through dominance as well. But Christianity, true Christianity, came in from Africans way before the Portuguese came and built those slave castles. But all that to say, yes, it is definitely, this is a global crisis. And I'm not using that word lightly. This is a global gospel crisis, because it's in Japan, it's in Saudi Arabia, it's in India, it's in Africa, it's among Native Americans in the Americas and black folks in the Americas. I've dealt with it with black folks in England. It's everywhere. The concept that Christianity is a white man's religion, the lie that it's a white man's religion because of all the whitewashing that Pastor Gay covers in the book, and he's going to break it down to you in that book, and it's fire. So y'all need to go and get a copy of The Whitewashing of Christianity, Pastor Jerome Gay, right now. I already got mine at the crib, and I'm having my students read it, Pastor. And so get you a copy, because he breaks it down. And so when the way that you break it down, Pastor, it makes it clear why people think that. And so again, it's because of the whitewashing that people have that mentality. But praise be to God that the same multi-ethnic body that he died and rose again for, that we see in Acts 2, and that's still around today, has always been there. And that the gospel has been among our people since day one.
Amen. Woof. Amen. Dr. Bantu, man, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Family, I pray you've been as blessed by this as I have. Listen, again, we're talking about my book, but we this is all love. Get Dr. Bantu's book here. Get that one. A Multitude of All Peoples. Make sure you get that. A Multitude of All Peoples. Also get Gospel Haymanot. Make sure you get that. Sign up again for my sister's conference taking place in September 3rd and 4th. My sister Lisa Fields, who's killing it for apologetics. I got 2 books: Renewal, Grace and Redemption, the Story of Ruth. It's a commentary on the book of Ruth. We got to write more commentaries. It's available wherever books are sold, as well as obviously the book I'm really talking about, really excited about what God is doing with this. And God is opening doors with some non-believers, with millions of people following him. This information beginning to get out. So I pray that you will support and get that. And listen, family, if you want signed copies, go to my website. You can get signed copies of both of these books. You get signed copies of both. And again, with this one, you can get Kindle. Kindle is on sale right now, so download the Kindle version. But again, Dr. Bantu, thank you so much. I'm excited to see you next month, man, in DC with my sister Lisa Fields and tons of other scholars. And I want to end with this, family, because Dr. Bantu alluded to it, but this is so important that you get this. The reason we have to address whitewashing, and I say this every chance I get, the answer to whitewashing is not blackwashing. And we're not discounting the contributions of other people of the faith. The issue isn't the inclusion of my white brothers and sisters. The issue is the exclusion of my black and brown brothers and sisters. Because when you look at St. Vladimir's Press and you look at the scholarly publications, they have literally painted everybody in scripture and in history white. And that's a problem all Christians should have, not just black and brown, not just people of a darker hue. And so this is an evangelistic issue because people are choosing to reject Christ as a result of these issues. And so, family, I just pray that you'll get the book. I'm just gonna go through and let you see some of the love, man. You know, these are some of the comments. Jasmine Smith, from what you said, man. Winter Todd, one of the family of Vision. What's up, Winter? Looking forward to seeing you guys. I'm back next week. Can't wait. John M gave you the praise hands, man. Servant of Christ said, "Amen." JT just gave you the fires. People said got both books from us, man. And so I can't even get to everything, man. It's a lot of comments, but I just want you to see the love, family. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, Dr. Bantu, man. Thank you again for this. We'll be back. We'll continue to have more content. Go get Dr. Bantu's book. Get my book, The Whitewashing of Christianity. It will help you. There are discussion questions in there as well. And there are over 240 citations. So we're not just saying stuff. The references are here, so you can go and check behind us. So listen, you've been tuned into the Urban Perspective. I love you. God bless you. Peace.